We are out at Tejas Motorsports in Highlands, Texas. Yamaha is out here doing a demo day. I want to try some of the new Yamahas like the Tenere 700, the Tenere 1200, maybe a few others. Let's see what we think. First view on all these bikes, so I'll be talking about ergonomics, power, rideability, just my personal thoughts on what these bikes are after the first time on them for about a 15-minute ride. We are on the 2022 Yamaha Tenere 700. This is the first time I've ever ridden this bike. It's the first time I've ever actually sat on the bike. First impression, the seat tray is very, very wide. Nothing compared to my Versys 650, which is pretty comfortable. This is comfortable once riding, but when standing, it just pinches your legs just a little bit, and it feels kind of strange. If you have a low inseam, this is probably going to be too tall for you. It's a very tall bike, and it's meant as an off-road adventure bike for sure. So that ground clearance is super important to have. Another thing to note is the dash. The screen right here is like rubber mounted on bushings, and it bounces quite a bit. It's a pretty torquey motor. I feel like it's got some good get up and go, some pep to it. So the foot pegs are pretty cool too. The foot pegs are mixture peg, a rubber peg surrounded by a metal spike, like a motocross off-road peg. So the rubber does a really good job of dampening the vibrations of the bike. I don't feel it too buzzy at all, which is nice. I don't know if you guys are interested in this kind of thing, but it feels like it has the power to do wheelies. Obviously I can't try to do that today on a demo ride. The bike is not mine. I'd get into a lot of trouble for that. It does have a full-size front tire for off-roading, so this is something that you can take through the woods pretty effectively. I actually think this would be pretty decent for long-term travel too. I mean, with a different seat. The seat's not super comfortable, but the ergonomics are great for where my hands are, my shoulders, my knees. Like, I feel like this is a pretty comfortable touring style bike. The windscreen, although it is kind of small, it does create a good little bubble around me for buffeting. My head's not bouncing around. There is a spot on the clutch cover that keeps hitting my leg. I feel like maybe it's because of the way I'm riding, but I'm used to keeping my ankles pretty tight to the frame, and that puts my shin right on the engine. It looks like there's a heat guard there, but that's something to be cognizant of in longer rides. I'm just now noticing in the dash there's actually a power outlet, a DC outlet, and it looks like an additional port for an auxiliary of some kind. I'm not sure if you could put a voltmeter in there or something else, but over on the right hand side there's an opening, which is pretty cool. This bike is begging me to do wheelies and go off-road. It's comfortable on the road, but man, I just want to go play in the dirt. So obviously I didn't get to take the bike off-road, but I think it's fully capable of going off-road. One thing I do want to say that I did try was standing on the bike. I mentioned that the seat pan was a bit wider and it made it uncomfortable at a stoplight, but the width actually comes in very handy when you're standing on the bike because it aligns with your knees. You can use your knees to grab the tank and the seat. Something worth noting about the Tenere 700 is I rode the standard model with the regular seat height. There is an S model, which is shorter. My brother-in-law, who is about the same height as me, if not a couple inches taller, he rode the S, the short version, and said it was actually more comfortable. The way that the seat was shaped and on the lowering link, it actually made it feel more grounded and a bit easier to ride. Again, you lose ground clearance when you do that kind of thing, but it's worth considering if you have a shorter inseam or if you're just a shorter person in general. You could check out the S, and I believe it's around the same price point, so it's worth looking into. So was the Tenere 700 enough to convert me from a Kawasaki guy to a Yamaha guy? I don't think it was. I do really enjoy my Versys 650. I only paid $5,000 for my bike. The Tenere 700 starts out new at around $10,000, so it's double what I paid for my bike. I don't think it's double the power or double the excitement, but I do think it gives the new Versys 650 a run for its money. It's only $400 more than the 2022 Versys 650, and they're comparable motors, but I think the Tenere has a little bit more pep to it, and that front wheel makes a huge difference when going off-road. That's something definitely worth considering if that's your main goal.
Let's go ride the Tenere 1200, the Super Tenere, and see what we think of that one.
First ride on the Tenere 1200, or the Super Tenere as they call it. It's a heavy bike, it's a big bike, but this seat is really comfortable. I like the position of it. It doesn't pitch you forward too much. Squishy. Standing up is pretty comfortable. It's a good angle. You've got a good wide tank to put your knees on. I don't feel like I'm having to lean over. I can actually stand up fully, and I'm 6 feet tall. The double gauge is kind of interesting. You've got all of your engine equipment on the right. You've got your basic stuff on the left, like your tachometer, speedometer, fuel gauge, clock. I will say that this gauge system does not vibrate nearly as much as the 700 did. The 700 was a single screen and it kind of bounced up and down quite a bit. This one seems very stable. This is a very stable bike. This is very planted. This is comfortable. Like I said, it is a heavier bike than some, but that does help it ride well. I mean, balance-wise, it's comfortable. The engine, the power is very smooth. It's a linear delivery. It's not like it's super torquey or jumping right off the line. I don't feel like there's a need to shift a whole lot. Like, I've been in third gear, and that's a pretty good range of speeds. Like, some bikes you jump on and you're like, man, this thing wants to wheelie. This one does not. I don't know if it's maybe because it feels like it has a lot of distance between me and the front of the bike. It does feel like it has a longer wheelbase, which contributes to helping it feel really smooth when riding. But I don't get on the gas and think, man, I should just wheelie this. Not saying it can't do that, probably can, but I will not be trying it today. It moves when it wants to, but it does feel a bit like a tractor. It doesn't have like a super bike feel. Like, I know this isn't the same class as the Versys 1000, but the Versys 1000 feels like it has that punch of a super bike, but in a touring bike. This one feels more like the BMWs do, with, again, linear power, very smooth, very drivable. I feel like it's usable power. By the way, I'd like to mention that I am still using my Dango Designs gripper mount and the cheap Amazon boom mic that I have. I have a review video of that setup. Just so you know, this is at highway speeds, cruising speeds, you know, 50, 60 miles per hour. Let me know what you think about how it sounds, because this was only a $12 microphone that I'm using right now. This windscreen is awesome. I still get some airflow, but I don't get like any buffeting. My head's not bouncing back and forth. And for those of you who are curious, I'm using an Arai Corsair V. It's the older Corsairs from, I don't know, 2017 or so. I am due for a replacement helmet soon, but this is my go-to for a street ride. That's funny. When the clutch is pulled in, the gear indicator shows no gear, even if it's in gear. This guy on the Tenere 700 in front of me. Be fun to do a slow contest with him. He's got some good balance. It feels kind of like a tank. Big, heavy? Yeah, it's like a Cadillac. It's comfortable, but it's not like, it doesn't excite me as a bike that I would go and buy.
Yeah. I haven't gotten out of third gear.
All right. Yeah, that is very weird that you have to be off the clutch for the gear indicator to actually tell you what gear you're in. So if you're at a stoplight and you don't know what gear you're in because you've got the clutch in, you hopefully remember from, you know, old school riding where you didn't have a gear indicator. I say old school, like 80% of bikes don't have gear indicators. I was gonna do a little noise for the fans. I feel like the foot pegs are different. Like the left foot peg, oh, I guess it's the shift linkage. Yeah, the shift linkage is up a bit high compared to the foot peg. So my toe keeps touching the linkage. I typically ride with my toes as close to the frame as possible. I guess that's an old road race thing.
The Tenere, Super Tenere 1200, is a bike not like anyone I have in my garage. I've never owned a bike like this one before. It is totally different than most bikes that I've ridden too. It's more sport touring. This bike is not me. I am not the target demographic for this motorcycle at all, but it is a great bike for what it is. On Yamaha's website, it puts the Super Tenere into the adventure touring classification. That's fair. The pictures that they show, the gallery, have the bike running through some puddles, some small amounts of water and off-road riding, but the off-road riding is really just maintained access roads. And that's great, that's fun, that's awesome. But this is not something you're gonna take to the woods. You're not gonna take this completely off-road. You're not going to do any trails with this bike. It only has a 19-inch front wheel, so it's a bit better at the off-roading than, say, the Versys 1000. But again, didn't excite me. You heard me say to my brother-in-law in the video, it feels like a Cadillac. It doesn't make me want to buy this. When I got off the bike, I felt the same way. I felt like, okay, cool, I'm glad I experienced it, but I would never spend this kind of money on it. The bike is cheaper than the Versys 1000, but I would buy the Versys 1000. Much faster than I will buy the Super Tenere. It just didn't get me going for a motorcycle where I would go, oh, I want to ride it. I did ride the MT10, the SP. Fantastic ride. I loved that bike. I giggled on that bike ride. Unfortunately, my battery died and I didn't get a recording of it. That is a bike I got off of and said, I could buy this bike. I could own this bike. The Super Tenere left me wanting more. Curious to know your thoughts? Leave some comments below.